Welcome back to our YouTube channel. My name is Lucas R32 Sky, and I'm joined by the cricket badger James Butler. We're here to preview England versus Ireland and a bit of the World Test Championship final. James, thank you for joining our show.
It's a pleasure, always.
We do apologise for last week's video. We had technical problems, and hopefully that never happens again. But unfortunately, it is out of our control. So on to this game, the 1st of June, first day of summer for England, first day of winter for Australia. England had a test match against Ireland. They won the toss and decided to bowl first. And James, it was pretty much the Stuart Broad show in that first innings.
Yeah, it was. It had a feel, the entire test match had a bit of a feel of an exhibition match, really, because Ireland, with all due respect to them, not in the same class as this England test team. That toss was important. I think if Ireland had bowled first, it might have been a little bit more equal because Ireland had the worst conditions to bat in at the start of that test match, and then England had the best conditions to bat in, and obviously made the most of that. But as you say, Stuart Broad ran in, 36 years old now, but still looks in his pomp, doesn't he? And destroyed Ireland, really. Bowled really well in that initial spell, came back and picked up a few more, and yeah, fully deserved what he got. But I felt all of England's bowlers put it in the right areas and made Ireland really struggle.
Yeah, it was a fascinating test match because it looked like at one point we might see a 2-day test. And then Ireland were very competitive, more than competitive. They held their own with their batting in their second innings. We'll get into that a little bit later. So if you look at it on paper, you think it went 3 days. Let's remember it's a 4-day test for some weird reason. 3 days last session. That's competitive, but it was far from that. Having said that, I think Ireland, especially in their first innings, had players that had a lot of starts. McCallum looks very good for his 30. Sterling was bashing around as he does in the white ball for 30. Camper made a very good 30. I was a little bit disappointed with Tector throwing his wicket away down the leg side. But I felt Ireland, they got plenty of batsmen in positions to go on with the James, but didn't.
Yeah, but I think it's tough for them because, as I say, the conditions were never easy. I don't think they were ever really in. I agree with you. McCullum, I thought, played really well. Hopefully he's okay because obviously got injured in the second dig, and I thought he played very well organised all the way through, batted through that first session, looked pretty accomplished. I think Harry Tector is definitely a player to look out for Ireland. Yeah. I think he's potentially their best bat. Obviously, as you said, got done up like a kipper really in the first innings. Shouldn't have done what he did, but hopefully he'll learn from that. It looked very good in the second dig, and I think he's a player, as I say, to look out for Ireland. But yeah, you're right. I mean, but it was tough. It was tough for Ireland to get there at Lord's, and obviously losing those early wickets, they were up against it. But yeah, they rallied well in the second dig. I mean, 4-day test matches. I mean, Ireland in both test matches they played at Lord's have never looked like getting anywhere near a 5th day. So the 4-day test thing, I think, is fair enough. The ICC have said that 4-day test can be on the cards for the so-called smaller nations. I don't think that's necessarily an issue. I think what might be an issue with the way England are playing is they want to win as fast and as quickly and as dominantly as they possibly can against whoever they're playing. And I know from my previous experience, I used to work for Yorkshire selling tickets for test matches. I mean, you never used to be able to sell them for day 5, only occasionally. But day 4, you could sell a few. There's not many people that are going to be buying day 4 tickets for most test matches that England play at home with the way England are playing, because it's a lottery, isn't it? You buy. I'd imagine most day 4 tickets will go on sale overnight ahead of day 4 because Ben Stokes just wants in and out as quickly as possible. The draw is not going to be a factor in England test matches for the foreseeable.
Well, you mentioned England's quick. They want to win quickly. Their first thing is, but actually no. Before I go to that, Stuart Broad had picked up a 5-wicket haul, but Jack Leach chipped in with 3 wickets. How did you see that first innings of Leach?
I like the way Ben Stokes captains Leach.
Yep.
He gave him the ball early, gives him responsibility. He keeps the field in. If a player tries to take him on, Sterling did a few times. He keeps the field in and says, "Yeah, do it again. We'll get you in the end."
Yep.
And I think that's going to be, he was interesting against Ireland. I think Jack Leach bowled well against Ireland, but he was never under real pressure against Ireland. But you can only bowl them back against who you're facing.
Exactly.
It's going to be interesting when the Australians come up against Jack Leach, because last time in England they tried to knock him out the attack, and they were successful on a couple of occasions, and they will try that again. And so Jack Leach, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. If David Warner and co try and get down the track at him, hit him over the top, Ben Stokes will keep the field in. How long will he be able to keep Jack Leach on if Australia do that on a regular basis remains to be seen.
Well, I made a tweet earlier in the first innings. I said, I don't remember what I said. I said something on the lines of, I'm not surprised that more batsmen go after Leach. Why don't they just tonk him like we saw with David Warner, like we saw with Steve Smith in the Ashes? Now, to a certain extent, Ireland did that in the second innings, which we'll get more into. But you mentioned pressure. What does Ben Stokes do when the Australian batsman will come after Leach? Well, we saw that. I don't want to mention the second innings, but we saw in the second innings he went to Joe Root. Now Joe Root got the breakthrough. Yeah, okay, whatever. But will Ben Stokes be hesitant to keep Jack Leach on when if he does get after by the Australian batsman in the Ashes?
I don't think so. I think the sort of MO from Ben Stokes is to just carry on the front foot. I remember when Jason Gillespie came into Yorkshire and had Adil Rashid under his wing. He basically said, "I don't mind if you get hit for 3 sixes. Keep tossing it up. Keep giving it a rip. Keep doing what you do. We trust in you to succeed." And I think that'll be the same message to Jack Leach. Keep doing what you're doing. We believe in you. Ultimately, they will come a cropper. So it's going to be, like I say, that's going to be fascinating. I mean, the entire Ashes, certainly the first couple of Test matches, are going to be really interesting to see how England on the front foot, which they will be, they will try and baseball Australia into smithereens. It's going to be interesting to see whether they're able to do that against a better quality attack, because Australia are a better quality bowling attack than Ireland have possess. I was really disappointed with Ireland's bowling. I thought Ireland's bowling looked quite ordinary. I actually tweeted slightly tongue-in-cheek because I was only a very ordinary club cricketer. But you look at most Test teams, even the weaker ones, and they've got one bowler who you fear. They've got one spearhead. They've got one spinner or something that can do a job. With Ireland, they look pretty toothless. And I would have fancied actually surviving against that Ireland attack. I wouldn't have scored any runs, and they'd probably ended up getting me out. But I reckon I could have stayed in there for a little bit against that Ireland attack, where against any other World 11, somebody would have got me, or somebody would have knocked my head off, or somebody would have done something. So that is a concern. And I think just before we go on in further, I think there is a danger at the moment in world cricket that everybody's very selfish. Everybody's trying to build their empires. Everybody's trying to make money. Everybody's trying to make their brand of cricket the one to buy and to look after themselves. And obviously there is some understanding with that, because if I was appointed to be the managing director of Indian cricket, Australian cricket, England cricket, your job is to further the brand, to make as much money as possible, and to be as successful as possible. So in that respect, the governing bodies of the big three are doing what they're employed to do. But there's got to be, Lucas, some kind of harness on that. There's got to be some kind of bigger picture where we do also look after and share the spoils of the global game with Ireland, Scotland, Afghanistan, some of the sort of smaller nations that are trying to make their way, have got to be looked after a little bit. Obviously, Ireland's situation has changed. I initially thought it was Brexit, but I think I was wrong with that. I think it's actually just because they got test status. The ECB made the decision that we have to treat Irish players just like any other nation.
That's
So,
pathetic. Yeah.
so the Irish players, I mean, the most notable pair was Tim Murtagh and Paul
Yeah.
Sterling at Middlesex.
Yeah.
Tim Murtagh, I think probably largely because of his age, he's now in his early 40s, opted to finish his career with Middlesex. He played for them for a long time, had success there. So he's opted to go down the county route and to retire from playing for Ireland. Paul Sterling still sees an international career, and obviously it's quite exciting if you're an Irish player at the moment. You're getting opportunities you weren't getting before as an Irish player to play Test cricket and to tour some nations and to play big boy cricket, for want of a better phrase. So Paul Sterling's opted to go down that route, but by virtue of that, has had to forsake his county contract with Middlesex. And I can understand to a degree that decision, but I think as an Englishman living in England, you grow up to have the home nations. Now, Republic of Ireland is slightly different because they are overseas, but even then, Irish people appear on English television on a regular basis as hosts. There is a very strong connection and affinity, I think, between Wales, Ireland, Scotland, and England. It is one big nation, but with very proud, independent identities. And I think there is some scope to say, let's treat Ireland as domestic cricketers. It can only be better for the game if you get the best of the Irish players. I mean, the counties aren't daft. They're not going to employ Ireland cricketers just because they're Irish. They're going to employ them because they can do a job for their county. And the likes of Paul Sterling can add to a county side. Harry Tector, I think, would certainly interest county teams if he was available for them. So I think it's quite small-minded and quite selfish and quite blinkered to deny Irish players the opportunity to play in the county championship, because it's a little bit like, I mean, you can say the same for Australia, you can say the same for India. Very very proud of who they are, quite rightly. Very interested in making their own brands and making their own money, quite rightly. But they also need to they need to see that a healthy and strong global game is good for them too, because ultimately the route that we're traveling down at the moment, with the IPL being so big and India being so dominant, and obviously India is hugely important to global cricket because they've got the majority of cricket fans, 1.4 billion in their own country, plus countless others overseas. So they're vital. India is vital. We can't just say India clear off, we're going to do this ourselves, because India is important. But I think there needs to be, and equally Australia and England, but there needs to be a global, whether it's the ICC, however it's done, the ICC needs to grow a pair, I think, and actually try and dictate how the global landscape goes. And teams like Ireland, teams like West Indies, teams like South Africa, even to a degree, need the support, and that's financial mainly, but need the support so that they can exist and be and thrive under their own steam and get better. And Ireland hasn't even got its own first-class structure, because historically Ireland's used England's first-class structure to, the better players, Owen Morgan in the past. What's his face from Sussex? I can't remember his name. That's really bad of me. But the Irish lads have come into English cricket, used that as their foundation, then played for Ireland, and in the past have delighted in one-day global tournaments, taken big scalps, ultimately got their test status. And now the landscape's changed, and almost the rug's being pulled out the way of Ireland. And yes, it's crucial for India to be successful. It's crucial for England to be successful, Australia to be successful. But we're coming up to the Ashes, and now if say, and in the past, in England and Australia have been just as guilty as India are currently being. So there's no kind of moral high ground here. Both Australia and England have tried to feather their own nests and be as powerful as possible and dominant as possible, and be the biggest voices in the ICC. India currently has that ability to be very powerful. But if you think about England and Australia, there is no point. Obviously, whenever England and Australia meet, England wants to smash Australia. Australia wants to smash England. It's very competitive. There's a long history to that contest. But step back a second. English people want Australia to be competitive. Australians want England to be competitive, because otherwise the Ashes ends up falling apart. If it's dominated by one side all the time, it's falling apart. So if Australia was to suddenly go downhill and England was just going to, ultimately, it's meaningless, isn't it? If every test match was, I mean, there have been test matches, don't get me wrong, when England have gone to Australia and been worse than Ireland against Australia. But, but Australia find it hard in England. It's important that we have the nations that have got test status backed, financially backed by having enough games, and and that they get better and find their feet. It always takes new nations a long time to actually get up to speed at test level, because we've seen it in the past with Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka. It takes a long time to get your first win, to get your first series win, and then to be a match that other nations fear. At the moment, Ireland are nowhere near that. But hopefully, if they're invested in, then they can be. But if all we're going to be doing is giving the big bucks to India, then that is a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. You're dooming some of these smaller nations to obscurity, and it's not good for India. If we come to the final point, India, quite rightly, is looking after itself and is quite rightly trying to build the IPL and trying to make themselves successful. But if they step back and if they see a landscape globally where Australia are weaker, England are weaker, the other nations start to then fall apart as well, we're going to, in 20 years' time, only been playing cricket in India. And that's not going to be good for anybody, apart from Indian supporters. I mean, even Indian supporters want to see good quality contests against overseas competitors.
Well, we'll get back to the game in a second, because we're addressing some good points. But it's not just when England play Australia. We have West Indies 2 years in a row. Yeah. And there's been I don't know, you might be aware of that, but there's been a huge uproar saying, well, why are we playing West Indies again? They only last 3 days. They're not competitive. Adelaide Oval has pulled the day-night test and gone back to traditional day test, which I'm very angrily and disappointed in. But you don't want to see that. Yes, we want to win, as you said, but we want to be challenged. We don't want test matches ending in 3 days, James.
No, that's all.
We don't want.
If we think about West Indies, they're a good example, because West Indies, when I was growing up, were the best in the world. They were superb. Viv Richards was the player that made me love cricket, really, as much as anything. His swagger, his dominance at the crease, batting in that maroon cap against bowlers trying to knock his head off, but hooking them into the stands for 6. Just awesome. And that it wasn't just Viv Richards; it was a full 11 plus that dominated the world game. 4 fast bowlers on rotation. Some brilliant players, but West Indies have gone downhill, and it's largely financial because they haven't been able to offer their best players enough to keep them away from the franchise circus and to keep them playing Test cricket. And I don't blame any player, whether you're Chris Gale or whether you're a lesser known West Indies player. If you're offered an IPL contract and you can get enough money to set yourself up and your family up and be successful and money's important to everybody. So if you can do that and go down the franchise route, I don't blame you. But what we need to do is get a global game where the ICC and others and the countries combine to say, right, let's give a little bit more to West Indies, because it's good for when the West Indies were dominant, everybody loved it. We hated being beaten 5-0 by West Indies at home, but they're the best memories of my youth watching Michael Holding racing in and Viv Richards batting and all the rest of it. So it's hugely important that we look at, and I can remember I interviewed Desmond Haynes when I was out in Barbados, and we were talking about the future of the game and stuff. And he said, it's in Barbados, still a massive love of cricket. Still people want to play cricket. Kids want to pick up bats and balls. But there has to be, and he said he find it, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said he found it almost patronizing when people said it would be great to see. It's great to see West Indies winning. It's, hark back to my youth. Let's see a strong West Indies side. That's just words. what he was saying, it has to be financial. It has to be proper support for West Indies cricket so that they are able to invest in their grassroots. They're able to invest in their first class system. They're able to invest in their international players to keep them as West Indian and to keep them and to try and build, because West Indies cricket, and certainly in the Test arena, is a shadow of its former self, and that is really sad.
Is the ICC afraid to give money to these nations, basically based on that they will probably fund it on white ball cricket?
The trouble is with ICC is they are very much, I think, scared to upset India, because India is massively powerful, and we know that. And there's that has to be harnessed to a degree. They have to sit down with India and say, kind of have the chat we're having, and say, like, it's good for the game, it's good for Indian cricket. Yeah, ultimately, Lucas, in 20 years' time, if South Africa have got weaker, if West Indies have got even weaker, if New Zealand, who are boxing well above their weight per head of population at the moment, get weaker, then where do IPL find their overseas players? Because IPL fans love to have the big guys coming in from abroad. They can then say it's the best tournament in the world because we got the best players in the world playing. But if these nations are getting weaker, and the Kane Williamsons of the future and the Chris Gales of the future opt to play a different sport or do something different entirely, then where do the IPL get their overseas players? It's short-sighted to just think about the next two or 3 years. We've got to think decade upon decade and how cricket's going to look in 20 or 30 years' time. And that has to be, I mean, India, as I understand it, currently gets something like 33% of the ICC revenue because of the population and because of what they bring to the party in terms of TV revenue, which is fine. But they're now trying to get 38% because they're saying now we're bigger, we're so important to you, we deserve more. And I can see that from an Indian perspective. I can see that argument, but there's got to be some kind of selflessness there from India to say, we are the biggest, we are the best, we bring in the most revenue, but we're also going to be also a little bit humble and a little bit, and acknowledge the wider world and give some of that money back into some of the other nations. It might mean that there's uproar in 5 years' time when a West Indies team go to India and beat them, because all of a sudden the money that India has kind of given back in comes back to bite them. But I think you need to. In all sports, it's great to get dominant sides. We've seen the Australians of the 1930s. We've seen the West Indies of the 1970s and 80s. We've seen the Australians then again of the early noughties. Fantastic sides that we all look back at, and books have been written about and films have been made about. And this Indian side over the next 10 years could become another one of those where they're just all dominant and successful. But ultimately, if that stretches on too far, it's a good thing to have a dominant side. Like England at the moment in white ball cricket are dominant, and England's baseball, they could be dominant. But if that goes on too long, it's not good for the game. You can have a period of maybe 5 or 10 years where you get dominance, but then sport should be cyclical, and another nation then bites back a little bit. But danger at the moment is that India could just rule the roost forever. I mean, they haven't won a global ICC tournament for a while. That's a big bugbear. But I've got a funny feeling if they win one, they could win the next 10. And that's not good for cricket either.
Going back to this test, going back to what you said about Ireland not getting enough test status. What's wrong with teams that travel to the UK, play Ireland in a once-off test? What's wrong with teams going to South Africa and playing Zimbabwe in a once-off test? What's wrong with India, teams going to India and playing Afghanistan in a once-off test? Why can't that be done?
I mean,
why can't we just add them to a tour for once-off tests, like Australia going to England? Well, they play Ireland. Well, South Africa going to India. Well, they play Afghanistan in once-off test. What's wrong with that?
I mean, the trouble is there's not much time in the calendar, is there? That would be the argument against it. The IPL stretches for so long. The England summer gets kind of condensed a little bit because of that. But I mean, it always used to be that when teams toured, they'd play a couple of warm-up games against local teams, wouldn't they? They'd play a state side in Australia. They'd play a county side in England. Yeah. I think Australia probably will have a county game before the Ashes start. So I'd imagine. I haven't looked at the fixtures. I don't know that for sure, but I'd imagine they usually do. So why couldn't you just substitute that warm-up game
Mm.
by going to
Yeah.
Ireland and playing a 4-day
Yeah.
test match, and then nip,
Yeah.
or if it's a white ball series you're coming for, pop to Scotland, pop to Ireland, then come to
Mm.
England. Yeah, just to support these other nations. I think India are playing against Ireland in a 3 one-day series coming up soon. That's in Ireland. That's going to give them some money because obviously Indian TV rights are big. So hopefully that'll help Irish cricket. But that's got to be. It can't be just a one-off every 5 years. That's got to be
Yeah.
something that's done, like you say, planned into the schedule every summer to actually support these teams. I mean, I'd love it. I'd absolutely love it.
Yeah.
If in 4 years' time, if Ireland come to Lords and give England a real kicking, find their feet and find a spinner and find a batter and come and at least compete and go toe to toe and take it right to the wire or something, or get a draw, or every team struggles when they first, as I say, get test status, and you start to get that belief and that confidence by marginal gains, don't you? If you can get a draw against a team that always beats you, if you can suddenly get your first victory, all of those things go into the melting pot to make you a stronger nation. And hopefully, a little Owen Morgan or something walking around Dublin at the moment, who's 10 years old, suddenly sees it on the television, picks up a cricket bat and becomes a future star. You need to inspire the future generations, and you do that by getting a little bit of success here and there.
Well, if Ireland are going to be a powerhouse, I think they might need to improve their bowling stocks because, as you mentioned earlier, that back to this game in England's first innings, they made 524, declaring for 4. Just absolutely just dramatized the Irish bowlers. I think all of England's batsmen had a plus strike rate average of 95. Ollie Pope made a double 100. Ben Duckett made 180 or something, so 182. Root was made 56. Zach Crawley made 56. Do you say it's good batting? It's both, or is it just bad bowling that the quality wasn't there?
There's always going to be. I mean, in 10 years' time, when you look back at people's averages, you don't actually, unless you're a real badger like me and you don't really dig deep into who you score them against. But against Ollie Pope's double 100, he played beautifully. Absolutely, he actually looked a little bit rusty when he first came in, but he gritted his teeth, and then by the end of it, he was absolutely superb. And he's an absolute star, Ollie Pope. I think I'm glad England have persevered with him. It was a brave call to put him at the number 3. Apparently, he requested that, and they backed him, and it's now coming good. We'll see him against. There's always going to be that. It was against Ireland kind of tag, though, isn't it? Against that Irish attack. Whereas, hopefully Ollie Pope will be walking off Edgbaston in a couple of weeks' time with a double 100 against Australia. You're shaking your head. I'm nodding my head, but who knows? So but that remains to be seen. But you earn your straps really as if you score your runs in Test cricket against the big boys. Again, in those really kind of looked forward to series like England, India, England, Australia, Australia, India, etc. And so they played brilliantly. Loads of records tumbled. There were 2 examples of 100 in a session. Ben Duckett in the morning on day 2, Ollie Pope in the afternoon, I think, on day 2, 100 in the session, which is very rare in Test cricket. And they rattled along at over 6 and over, which I think in English conditions, that is the biggest scoring rate in any Test match that's lasted for more than 20 overs. So, there were loads of records tumbled. That, with all due respect, it was against Ireland, and that attack didn't look particularly dangerous. So if they can do, if we're talking in a few weeks' time and they've done it a couple of times against Australia, then yay. But at the moment, it looked like a warm-up game, didn't it?
Yeah, well, that's what it basically was. It was going to be a warm-up game for England batsmen. Well, they certainly did that. On about Ben Duckett, recently came into this team. I think he played for England some years ago, then got dropped. Um, how do you see him going in this Ashes series?
I mean,
Obviously, he's going to try and buzz forward, obviously, but do you fear for him that he could be a target?
well, they'll target him because he's fresh
Yeah,
meat, isn't he, in terms of an
yeah,
Ashes
yeah,
series? But
yeah.
I think he's got a lot between his ears, and I think he's a very good player. He should have played more Test matches than he has done because he was rather unfortunate in a way that he got chucked in the subcontinent on tracks that were turning
Yeah,
square
yeah,
against Bangladesh and then against Ashwin and Co in India. He played two very tough series, didn't score very many runs, got ejected, and got ejected a little bit as well because he poured a pint over Jimmy Anderson, I think, if memory serves right. So he fell out a little bit and then got jettisoned out of the inner circle. But he's a really
as
good
you would.
player. But that the maybe the extra maturity that he's got now, maybe the time away and the hunger that's possibly given him makes him more more ready this time around. And he's a terrific player. I mean, yeah, he's the 182. It was a tremendous knock, albeit against an Irish attack. The but he's got runs in Pakistan. He's got he's
Yeah,
average since he's come back in the Ben Stokes era is big. I can't remember exactly what it is. It's somewhere about 60 or 70 now, I think, after he's
I
182.
think so.
So
Yeah.
he's scoring a lot of runs in this incarnation in an England shirt, and he will be really looking forward to the Ashes.
Uh, well, I know you keep bringing up Ireland, so we'll move away from their batting. Um, this is where it was really interesting. Ireland made their second innings, and I think they were down 3 for 63, and we're all thinking, all right, all out for 151. That was far from it, James. This was a very competitive second, well, more than competitive. They held their own. Irish team, they showed some spirit. It's just a shame they couldn't do that in the first innings. Maybe the sun was out. They had better conditions, but Ireland were really impressive in that second innings, James, especially as we talked about Tector, who I think is an absolute star. And only problem is I don't think he'll play enough Test matches to be recognised. I think he's a really good talent. That's what I fear with these Irish, well, not just Irish, but Zimbabwe, Afghanistan. They're just not going to play enough Test matches. When they do find a star, then they're just not going to be recognised. And I think Tector's going to be one of these players where he's not going to be recognised. He has an amazing technique, and we saw in the second innings, along with McBride and Adia. Sorry for the pronunciation.
Adair.
Adair. Okay. They really took it to England's bowlers, James. They were really impressive.
Yeah, the only thing with that is it kind of the match had gone by then, hadn't it?
Yeah.
And I think we've seen this quite a lot with emerging Test nations. Is the fight comes too late almost.
Yeah.
When you're actually 50-50 on the first morning, that's when you need that fight. But as I say, it was a bad toss for them to lose. But by the time that McBride and Adair had got their had got their 80s, the game had gone, and it was just really a case of prolonging it and gaining a little bit of respectability in the overall scheme of things. Tector was terrific. I really agree with you. I think I rate him. I really like Lorcan Tucker as well, their keeper.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good little Test player. He knows his game. He's quite aggressive at times. And McBride and Adair, that partnership that they put together was really good for Ireland. And obviously, you say they were 3 down fairly early, but McCullum had gone as well.
Yeah. Sorry.
He wasn't really going to return from that ankle injury, was he? I think they'd said that if McBride was on 98 or something when the ninth wicket fell, McCullum might hobble in and just try and get him to his 100. But obviously that didn't transpire. He was still 14 away, and it was going to be asking too much of a guy that was basically on crutches to go in there and stand up for that period of time. But yeah, they showed fight, and they had the better batting conditions than they did in the first innings on that day. And made the most of it. But yeah, that it just I guess from an Irish perspective, looking back, if only they could have shown that kind of fight in the first innings, then they would have been in a lot better position coming into. It would have put more pressure on England as well. First innings runs puts pressure on your opposition. Second innings runs when you're already a long way behind and heading to an innings defeat doesn't really change the game, does it?
not really. Would there be a concerns point from the English bowlers how Ireland went after them before the Ashes, or do they just say, well, this is probably just a once-off thing?
They'd look at it. They'd maybe have some tactics, but ultimately, England won the match by 10 wickets, didn't they? They knocked off. I mean, the success for Ireland was to make England bat again, wasn't it? And not to lose by an innings. So I mean, obviously the England second innings didn't last very long. They knocked off the runs very quickly. But the fact that Ireland actually made England bat twice was a feather in their cap. But I've seen a couple of people say, comparing Ireland's team 4 years ago when Tim Murtagh ran amok on the first day to the team that was at Lord's this time, they look like they've gone backwards a little bit. And that's the concern, I think, for Irish cricket is that, they need the backing. I mean, whether or not you end up with two divisions of Test nations and the Irish play Zimbabwe and Afghanistan and the like, or whether you rotate it around, one-off Test matches as well. Obviously there's a reason, because playing a 3-game series against Ireland, you would sell tickets in England, but it wouldn't be a massive draw. Especially if every game was so one-sided. But you need to. You don't really, when you're playing just one-off Test matches, you don't really get into the series, do you? When we come up to the Ashes in a couple of weeks' time, you'll get those narratives of Broad against Warner, and they develop through the 5 matches, and you kind of see how they Labuschagne taking on Anderson or whatever. Anderson may get him out cheaply in the first Test match, but then Labuschagne bounces back because he's learnt a few things. When it's just a one-off Test match, you don't get those things. Those narratives aren't able to develop, are they?
For the record, Ireland all out 362. England only needed 12. Crawley chased that down personally in 1 over and 4 balls, so they win that by 10 wickets. How did you see the debut of Josh Tongue?
We spoke.
Nervous first innings, probably nervous in the first innings, much better in the second.
I didn't think he showed any nerves. I think
really?
he bowled well in the first innings. He didn't quite get the look, and it wasn't a pitch at the time that was really giving him anything. There will be better pitches for Josh Tongue. A pitch with a bit more pace and bounce, and it would be far more useful, because the Lord's track was pretty easy to bat on. If you got in, by Test standards, it was a fairly good batting track. So Josh Tongue, I think, did really well. We spoke in our ill-fated recording the other day, which didn't make the airwaves. You asked me about Josh Tongue, and I said, he probably wasn't next in line. But obviously, with injuries ahead of him, Anderson and Robinson obviously missing out against Ireland, hopefully precautionary rather than because, with the Ashes in mind. It allowed Josh Tongue to maybe leapfrog a couple and get himself in there. They obviously saw something in the nets that he offered, because he got picked as the backup bowler, but obviously then jumped over Chris Wokes and got selected because they wanted to have a look at him in match action. And he did himself no harm at all. Bowled really well. I think he impressed. His accuracy was good. Had a little bit of bounce. He was hitting the bat hard. That phrase, bowls a heavy ball. You could see some of the Irish taking their hands off the bat when the ball hit the bat when he was bowling. So his performance in the first innings, where he got a couple of wickets, didn't he? He didn't get. He went wicketless, but he bowled well. To the performance in the second innings, where he was responsible for really knocking over the top order, finishing with a fifer on debut, goes on the honours board at Lord's. And whether he has a long career for England or not will depend on how some of the other bowlers do as well, because he hasn't really got first claim to that shirt, and I doubt very much he'll play in the first Ashes Test. But I think they've seen enough of him. He's been included in the 16 for the first 2 Ashes Test matches. And they've seen enough of him to trust him and know that if they need him, he's there. Couldn't do any more than that.
So for the record, England defeat Ireland by 10 wickets. Moving on from this game, before I do you have anything else you want to talk about that caught your eye in this game, James? How do you see Matthew Potts?
I like Matthew Potts. I think he's another one that's almost in the Tong category at the moment, who possibly, if you're picking your strongest England team, then whether he'd be in it or not. I'd like to see him in it, to be honest, but I don't know whether he'd be picked in the first 11 if everybody
Yeah,
was fit and firing.
yeah,
But it's a 5-test series coming up against the Australians. It's quite a short turnaround in terms of there's not too many gaps between test matches. So I'd be very surprised if any of the seamers play all 5 tests, including Jimmy and Stuart Broad. I think they'll rotate a little bit as they go through to just freshen the legs, and they'll obviously have in mind the surfaces they're playing on, and try and pick the best attack and give a few people a breather here and there. Because it's was only 6 weeks for all the 5 test matches to be played.
yeah,
So Old Trafford, which is usually bit of pace and bounce and maybe aid spin on towards the end, Leach will play, and you'll see Mark Wood, I would imagine, coming in there. You
yeah,
might even see Josh Tongue back into the side on
yeah,
Old Trafford. But at Edgbaston, where it's a bit more seam friendly and swings a little bit, you probably see Chris Wokes coming back in. Matthew Potts might play. Ollie Robinson will certainly come in if he's fit. So there may be a little bit of changing of the guard with England's bowling attack as they go through the Test series. You probably see the same with the Australians as well, because you've got a few there who struggle to get through an entire series. It's going to be a big ask as well for Pat Cummins, I think, to lead the attack and captain through a 5-test series played over such a short time scale. So whether he takes the field in every test match, he'll certainly want to, I'm sure. But whether
yeah,
he's
yeah.
able to physically or not, I don't know. But Hazelwood's had lots of injury problems, hasn't he? I doubt very much he plays all 5.
No, he won't play all 5. They'll probably rotate him with Boland. There's talk that Boland will actually play in the World Test Championship, which we'll get into in a little bit, just in a second. So I doubt Hazelwood will play all 5. The only bowler that I think will play all 5 is Nathan Lyon. Even Mitch Stark, in the past, has suffered a couple of injuries, nags. So he's not guaranteed to play 5 either. So, but Australia do have options. They have players like Michael Neser, Scott Boland playing in the county. They've got Sean Abbott playing in the county. So they have options just as like England do. Regarding this game, is there anything else that you want to talk about this game? Anything that caught your eye?
No, just I kind of wish Ireland well. Hopefully they get funded. Hopefully they get looked after. Hopefully they're able to carry on getting stronger. As we said, there's a couple, 2 or 3 players in that Ireland side that I think are decent, and hopefully they can build around them and get their first Test victory. I think it took Bangladesh about 10 years to get their first Test victory. Ireland with COVID might take a little bit longer, but it's. Hopefully they're on the up and they get enough Test matches to, because you look at their team and you see their first class stats flashed up on the screen. Played 3 times, played 5 times, played 9 times, and on a lot of occasions those handful of matches have been the Test matches. They haven't played first class games anywhere else, so they need more experience. They need to come up against the best sides and work out how to actually how to compete on the biggest stage, and hopefully they get that opportunity.
Moving on to the World Test Championship final, which starts on Wednesday. What's the perception like in England? Is there any care factor whatsoever? Is there does anyone care in England, like as far as the neutral goes, or they want India? They're really excited to see this. What's the perception like about that in England?
I've got a couple of friends who are English Indians, and they're quite excited by it. I will turn it on and have a look myself. I don't really care too much, I have to say. I like the concept of the World Test Championship.
As do I.
I like the fact it gives Test cricket relevance and a reason to be competitive throughout a series that might have gone dead. I like anything that has the intent on furthering Test cricket and preserving Test cricket. So from that perspective, fully behind the World Test Championship. In terms of has it captured my imagination and made me feverishly look forward to the World Test Championship final, the answer would be no. That might change if England got into the World Test Championship final. That might
Wow.
change my perspective, because despite the fact that I always say, because I do a lot of commentary on English series, and I genuinely, going into an English series, I don't really mind if England win the series, if England win the Test, as long as it's great cricket to watch. And I get as much joy from watching opposition players play against England as I do watching the England players be successful too. That might be slightly different in the Ashes, because that's a little bit more partisan. But the so it might just kind of steer me a little bit more towards the World Test Championship final if England got to World Test Championship final. But at the moment, I can see its reasoning, and I can see why it's a good thing for both Australia and India and New Zealand, obviously last time. But it's a Test match. I will turn it on, but I don't. It has no more in my head. It doesn't have any more significance than maybe turning on. Excuse me, turning on and watching Afghanistan play Bangladesh or something.
Yeah, I completely agree with you when you said that it's the right idea. I think it is too, but I think it's executed poorly. How can you have an ICC final, especially a Test final, so close to the Ashes? So I'll give you an example here. Let's say Australia win the ICC Test Championship final, then they lose the Ashes. Well, no one's going to give a damn about winning the ICC Test final games in Australia. It's all going to be about how you lost the Ashes, what have you done, etc., etc. The scheduling it's ridiculous. When this came out, I never liked it from the start. I would have preferred it to be at the end. Right, we've won the Ashes. Right, we got that out of the way. Let's go get the World Test Championship final. But it will mean nothing if we win it and then you lose the Ashes, and the authenticity of it will be gone.
You'd have been buzzballed into submission, Lucas, and trailed into the World Test Championship final with no confidence whatsoever. That'd have been the trouble with that. I don't subscribe to that cut totally, because it has to be played somewhere, at some stage. In a way, it's Australia's warm-up test, isn't it? To go into the Ashes, playing some seriously good opposition.
That word you just used, warm-up, but it isn't a warm-up. It's supposed to be an ICC major trophy event, but people are saying it's a warm-up for the Ashes.
It's both, isn't it? It can be both. It can be a.
But so wouldn't you make the scheduling?
It can be a global final
or way before it.
Yeah, but it can be a global final, but also very handy for Australia in terms of when it comes. Yeah. But equally as well, we talk about. I was just saying, wasn't I, about the Ashes being condensed, 5 Test matches condensed into a short period. You're basically playing 6 Test matches in a very short period, because you're playing that one as well.
Well, I don't care about if we're playing 10 Test matches in 10 weeks. That's not the problem. Like, I think the problem is that it's supposed to be an ICC major final, and if we win that tournament and then lose the Ashes, that's going to be forgotten in a heartbeat, James. That's the problem of it. An ICC final has no authenticity, because it's too close to.
I know what you're saying, but I do think we've got to get away from giving the Ashes such a huge billing. We, as English media and Australian media, everything is seen as being in the build up to the next Ashes. We talked all the way through, or the people on TV talked all the way through about the Ashes rather than about Ireland. The winter is seen as the build up to a big Ashes summer. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's England, Australia. Yes, it's the Ashes. It means a lot because it's got a big history, but it's not the only Test series ever played. And England against India, England against West Indies, England. There's a lot of great. We need to give prominence to those as well. It's disrespectful to the other nations to only ever talk about the Ashes, I think.
No, I agree. Like, Australia and India is massive. Australia and New Zealand's massive. Now, though you may not be aware of this, but we haven't played New Zealand in New Zealand since 2016.
Well, some of the best series England have played, both white ball and red ball, have been against New Zealand in the last decade. They've been the really competitive matches that have been fantastic to watch.
Hmm.
But they're almost seen as being well, they are seen as being secondary to the Ashes, which, yeah, of course they're going to sell out tickets. The prices will go up. It's a big revenue earner, and it's a big series. It probably is the biggest series that England play. But it needs to be just reined down a little bit and come a bit closer to the other series we play, because it's almost seen by people as being the only series worth talking about, and it's not. There are some brilliant Test series played at other times in the 4-year cycle.
Yeah. No, I couldn't imagine the Ashes being every year. That'd be bad for cricket. That'd be bad for Australia versus England. That's why it's every 4 years in England and Australia.
I mean, personally, Lucas, you talk about what's wrong with the World Test Championship. I mean, they did tinker with it. They made it slightly better, I think, in terms of the way the points are awarded. But I don't like that some series England have played aren't World Test Championship. Against New Zealand, played a series against New Zealand. Two of the best sides in the world come up against each other. No points available at all. So effectively, it's not deemed to be World Test Championship. And then you play 5 Test match series against some nations. You play 4 against another. You play 2 against another. You play 3 against another. If it was down to me, and one way of making the Ashes maybe a little bit shorter and sweeter, but still keep its pomp and circumstance, but I'd make every single series that any team ever plays 3 Test matches.
Including Ashes?
Including the Ashes.
Oh, no. You gotta... Come on, Jay, can't be serious.
Why?
Not the Ashes. Not India versus England or India versus Australia.
Why? Why not?
Well, that'd be absolute.
We're talking about trying to give.
I see.
We're talking about trying to give some of the so-called lesser nations a bit more time.
It's probably my fault. It's probably my foolish pride coming into here, and I understand. If you want to play 3 Test matches every series, like Ireland will get 3 Test matches, Zimbabwe, etc. But we do love our cricket, James, and I'm sure England loves their cricket, India loves their cricket, and so on. I just don't think fans would appreciate that. Having every Test match a 3 Test series.
All right, okay. Well, I'll take a step back from that. We'll preserve India, England, Australia matches played as 5 Test series, and then but every other series has to be 3.
That's fine. I can. Well, we're not
funded, though. That has to be funded because New Zealand lose money if they play more than 2 Test matches.
Yeah, well, that's a huge problem. Another thing with Test cricket, it costs a lot of money to run a game, and that's where to your point, ICC should put money into those nations to play Test cricket. No?
It's the only way where if Ireland travel all the way to New Zealand, as a nation without a huge budget. As I understand it, in the last cycle, their budget was 22 million, which, if you actually think it's international cricket, you've got to fund flights to other countries. You've got to do all the, employ people. You've got to pay people's wages. You've got to do all the rest of it, and the infrastructure and the kind of grassroots side of stuff. All that at 22 million sounds like a lot of money, but actually it isn't.
It's not.
So that basically puts them on the same kind of level as an English county kind of thing, in terms of their incomes and what have you. So, or in the same ballpark anyway. You're going to have to fund some of these guys. If Ireland are going to travel all the way to New Zealand to play 2 or 3 Test matches, you've got to actually help them a little bit. But that's the only way. Ireland, West Indies, it's even South Africa and Zimbabwe. You mentioned Zimbabwe. When was the last time England went? I mean, there was political reasons, but England playing Zimbabwe hasn't happened. I can't remember the last time England played Zimbabwe. England taking on Bangladesh in Bangladesh hasn't happened since Duckett last played, which was quite some years ago. There's test. An English Afghanistan Test match would be. Get some of these smaller nations playing the big boys and get them some revenue and help them out a little bit. That's all I want to see.
Didn't England play Afghanistan in a Test match? Oh, sorry, they played India. Sorry. They played India on their debut, didn't they? And they haven't played one since, I don't think.
I mean, there's a big. We could do a podcast on Afghanistan's situation on its own, because Afghanistan love their story, love the way they've come through all the ICC tiers up to the big table, competing at global white ball tournaments, taking big scalps, Rashid Khan, etc., etc., etc. But at the moment, the political situation in Afghanistan, the fact that women basically aren't even hardly let out from their own house, aren't now able to get education, aren't now able to play cricket. Surely, in this modern world, I mean, I'd hate to see it, but then ultimately, I hate to see what's happening in Afghanistan, and ICC might say, well, it's better for Afghanistan cricket to keep the men going. But ultimately, where do we want to stand? Do we want to stand on the right side of history, or do we want to stand on the wrong side of history? And at the moment, Afghanistan is on the wrong side of history because women aren't even allowed to pick up cricket bats in Afghanistan. And if you can't field an ICC women's team, you shouldn't be playing ICC matches. And Afghanistan, ICC has to make a stand and has to actually show the world what it actually thinks, that women's cricket is important.
If they did that, and the Taliban, I don't want to get political here, say, well, we don't care.
We're talking about political subjects. You have to get political.
Yeah. And if they say, well, we don't care, the men don't play, so be it. Will the ICC be willing to sacrifice that, even if it means not getting the result they wanted?
As I say, it depends which side of history you want to be seen to be on.
Yeah.
Does the ICC want to be seen to be condoning the regime that's led by the Taliban, who are keeping women away from education, sport, and everything else, or do the ICC want to be seen to be doing the right thing?
Well, for the record, if the ICC did say that, I don't think the Taliban would change their mind.
I don't think they would.
I don't think that. Yeah, no. You think
so
they would?
But ultimately, but at the moment, all of those women that used to be playing cricket for the Afghanistan national team aren't allowed to play. They aren't allowed to leave their homes. They're not allowed. The universities are shut to them. They're not able to work. They're not able to do anything that they used to do. And if we're actually, as a global game, treating women's cricket seriously, we have to also treat women's rights seriously, and we have to treat them seriously globally. And at the moment, there is a team playing international cricket at the top table of international cricket, a brilliant team with some brilliant players in it. Don't get me wrong, I love watching Afghanistan play. But if we are actually have any morals and scruples as a game, what's happening in Afghanistan isn't right. And we've got to actually say so. We didn't play against South Africa for the years of the apartheid regime. South Africa were taken off the international schedule. They had some fantastic players in that period. They had Clive Rice, they had Mike Proctor, they had some brilliant players, Barry Richards, who would have been a joy to watch on the international stage. But because of the horrific apartheid regime in South Africa, they were told you can't play international cricket. You're going to have to be sidelined. If you get, ultimately they got it sorted out. Nelson Mandela, long walk to freedom, all the rest of it, came back to the top table, have played international cricket ever since. Why is Afghanistan any different to
that? Incidentally, whereabouts is the Afghanistan headquarters located? Is it in India?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But what? Answer my question, Lucas. Why are Afghanistan any different to the apartheid situation in South Africa?
I don't think they are. Well, they're not.
So on that basis, cricket has to make a stand, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I agree. But at the same time, do you want it to become too political when we get in left versus right, all that kind of nonsense?
There's nothing to do with left versus right. It's about women's rights. And women deserve the chance to get an education, to play sport, and to have a long and fulfilling life, don't they? And at the moment,
of course. But is there enough people that will care about that? That's the problem. Will there be enough people that care about that?
I don't care if you care about it or not. If you don't care about it, you're not on the right side of it, are you?
Good point. No, that's good. But no, I completely agree with what you said. Yeah,
there's a lot of people tell me that when I talk about racism in English cricket, there's a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm bored of this now. I don't care about this. Let's just play." Well, I don't care if you care about it or not.
Yeah.
Racism, exactly. Racism's bad. So sod off.
Yeah, exactly. You may not like it, but I'm going to continue talking about it.
Yeah.
And if you can't, well, that's stiff pickies.
Ultimately, can cricket look itself in the mirror properly if at the moment Afghanistan are playing just a men's team in global events and the women aren't allowed to pick up a bat? I don't think they can.
No, I think Taliban need to get their priorities in place. I don't think they will personally, James, but we never know.
don't get me wrong, Lucas. I'd be gutted. I'd be absolutely. Afghanistan are one of the great stories of English of world cricket over the last decade or two. But ultimately, you have to do what's right or wrong. You have to
Yeah, no,
have to say what's right or wrong and make a stand on it.
no, 100% agree with that. Who's your favourite for the World Test final? I know you said that you'll turn it on, but who's your favourite? Who do you think will
I
win?
I think it's going to be interesting to see how India competes, because when they came
Yeah,
over to play their unfulfilled fixture, because they had to fly home that time, and they came back to play the one-off Test match, they seemed to be very undercooked in that one-off Test match.
yeah,
England found it very easy, or easier
yeah.
than I think they would have done normally. So if they come with that same kind of approach this time, for the World Test Championship final, then Australia, I think, would be favourites. If India come and are at full strength and compete and play at their very best, then I think Australia will struggle. So it's going to be a very interesting match. Um, yeah, the toss is
Well,
going to be important. The team composition is going to be important as well, because it might get some turn, because it's very sunny in England at the moment. The weather has been really good, and it promises to be very good for the duration of that Test match, certainly. So spin may, that pitch might dry out and spin may come into it. So I can see India going in with two spinners. Nathan Lyon will be overworked. It's whether how Australia read that pitch, whether they are happy to play a team with Labuschagne and Travis Head or something to provide the secondary spin, or whether they actually want to play a second spinner themselves, will come down to how they read the pitch on the morning of the match. But it's going to be interesting. Going to be a on the face of it, I'd say India are just favourites, but it could be a really good match.
well, I was just going to say to you that India were thinking about playing two spinners, which you don't really see in England that often. Two spinners. I think they want to play Jadeja because of his batting, but they're tossing up between Shakur and Ashwin as the fifth bowler. So that'll be very interesting to see which way they go with that one.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because Ashwin, I think, is a tremendous bowler, but in English
Yeah.
conditions, the Indian camp don't seem to. When India came to England and played that series, Ashwin sat most of it out, which surprised me at the time, and it would surprise me if they don't play him against Australia as well.
Oh well, for many years, Ashwin, wasn't the bowler he was in Australia. Now, the last tour of Australia where India won, Ashwin was really good. Not so much in taking wickets, but controlling his speed with natural variation. Just two balls he might bowl 90, next is 85. I think he really adjusted that well, and it was a huge part of their victory. But you're right, Ashwin's record in England isn't really that flash, to be honest. So,
but I mean,
it is
for him to improve on it, you need to play him, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. No, you
it's
do.
always,
Yeah. Well,
it's always
well,
going
if
to
it's
stay
this with
fairly. It's always going to stay fairly normal if you don't actually play any more Test matches, isn't it?
Well, indeed. So, no, I think that's it. I think we'll wrap it up. Actually, James, how's the county circuit? Any teams catching your eye in the county circuit?
I really enjoyed the first half of it. 14 matches, obviously, in the county championship season, and they played half of them already. So just as it starts to get sunny, the county championship has been put to one side, and the T20 Blast is being played at the moment, which is great for the counties. Hopefully, the counties are filling their coffers, because the sunshine. T20 Blast is very important to certainly the smaller counties, the counties that struggle for money. If you can fill your houses for T20 Blast, doesn't do your income streams any harm at all. So get out there, support your counties, get to matches. Been some really good matches in the Blast so far. Saw some really good championship fixtures as well. The streams actually in England now, not every match is on Sky, but every county now streams their own fixtures live, which is really good for supporters. Some of the numbers for those for watching those streams are very, very big, which kind of belies the one man in his dog kind of approach. When people kind of dismiss county cricket as being one man in his dog, nobody really cares. Some of the numbers for the streams for the championship certainly were very, very encouraging, and certainly suggest that there's a lot of people out there that care about English county cricket, which is great. And long may it stay sunny, and hopefully it stays sunny all the way through the Ashes as the English batter your team.
I'm personally sick to death of this baseball nonsense. Well, speaking of that,
You're going to
just
be
before I
even
wrap
more
up,
sick to death of it in a few weeks' time, Lucas, I think.
yeah, I would love nothing more to win 5-0. I think we can go. I think we'll preview our things when it gets to the Ashes, but just
Did
on
you?
that, Ben Stokes made a. I don't know if you saw this quote, James. I found this pretty sad, really, and pretty disappointing. Ben Stokes had an interview with Nasser Hussain, where Nasser Hussain mentioned Alistair Cook and Ian Bell, and he said to Ben Stokes, "Would you play them in your team?" And Ben Stokes kind of replied saying no because they don't play the baseball way. Have you heard that? Have you heard that quote? And what's your reaction to it?
That's the first I've heard of it, and that's
Okay.
just bloody stupid, isn't it?
Okay.
In my
No
opinion.
opinions on it?
I mean, well, I think it's stupid.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I mean, I think Ollie Pope and Ian Bell are the same person. I reckon he's just Ian Bell's been reincarnated whilst he's still been alive into Ollie Pope's body because he plays exactly the same way. So I mean, he could quite easily have played baseball. Ian Bell could. And Alistair Cook had a few more shots in him, and there is still scope for a player, even in England's current setup, to actually be a little bit more circumspect at times. Alistair Cook's one of the all-time greats of English cricket. So to say that you'd not play him in an English Test team is just bizarre to me. But equally, they are going down this route, and I don't know if you saw my predictions for the Ashes. And I tweeted what I thought the English summer would look like in terms of England's performances and the World Test Championship. And I had England to beat Ireland, tick. I had India to beat Australia. Actually, I can't remember how I called the World Test Championship, but I had Australia. Yeah, I had India to beat Australia, and then I had Australia to win the Test series against England 3-1.
I'll be happy with 3-1, but I think this baseball's hype. I think we can, if we go after them, I think they'll capitulate. I don't think they're going to score 6 or 7 over against Boland, Stark, or Lyon. I just do not see that happening. And I think
I'll tell you what, it's going to be very interesting because half of me agrees with you, but every time I've doubted baseball already, they've just come out and broken more records.
The Pakistan series is what turned, James, when they scored 9 and over in that first session.
Yeah. They basically will not take the foot off the gas.
Yeah.
Even if they lose the first Test match, they will then come back out and play exactly the same way.
I was going to mention that. I was going to say if they get absolutely battered in that first Test match and get embarrassed, would they still play the same way in the second Test match? How far will they go? Yeah.
They will go all 5 Test matches. It's just the way they play, and the way England play it's quite refreshing. The way they play is defeat is part of the tapestry of cricket. If they get beaten, they get beaten, but they will play their way, and that is their mantra. They will come out. They'll be on the front foot. Baseball isn't just about hitting 4s and 6s. Baseball is basically coming out and being of a positive mindset. If you have the choice between defense and attack, well, choose the attacking option rather than the defensive one. If you're in doubt in any situation, choose the attacking option rather than the defensive one. Try and put the bowlers on the back foot, and we will trust you. Play your game. And you see players coming out and playing in a very freed up manner because they don't fear failure. So many players of the past in every country, but in English cricket have walked to the crease looking like the weight of the world's on their shoulders because all they're doing is wondering how not to get out rather than how to score runs. Whereas this English team goes out looking to score runs and looking for the gaps. They see big gaps and they don't see the fielders. And if you fail, pat on the back, sit down, go again. So England will play baseball cricket all the way through the Ashes. I have feared that they're going to be rolled for 66 and be embarrassed by baseball pretty much every test they've played since in the last year since Bazball was invented, but they haven't done it yet. They
No.
carry on being successful. Every team they've come up against, they've taken the positive option and they have entertained and they have been successful. So why should Australia be any different? You're going to get
Yeah,
battered.
exactly. Well, we'll mention this in our
Oh, you
episode,
agree?
but I like.
You agree?
Yeah.
I finished.
Well, with what you
I,
said about, we thought they're going to get rolled for 67. Yeah, I agree with that, but they have kept on going.
I finished that sentence, Lucas, by saying you're going to get battered, and you say, "Yeah, absolutely."
Oh, what do you mean? England going to get battered? We're not going to get battered, because if we get battered in that first innings, James, I don't think I can be on this show anymore, and face you anymore.
Well, I'll tell you what. Apparently the order to the ground staff has been for flat, dry tracks.
Yeah.
To basically, so that, for want of a better phrase, English batsmen can tee off a little bit against the Australians. But
you said this on last week. You said that just favours Australia even more.
Well, I don't think it favours Australia. I think it actually, if anything, levels the playing field a little bit, because Australia can bat on flat, dry tracks too.
Yeah.
Australia have got some very good batters in their lineup. Yeah. Steve Smith's one of the best we've ever seen. Labuschagne, fresh from his another stint in county cricket, comes in with confidence. So you basically you're asking England's bowling attack to then bowl on those same tracks too. So that's it's. I mean, it's the upshot is, however we see it, England are going to Bazball it. Australia are probably going to come and try and out Bazball England to some extent. They're going to go toe to toe over 5 test matches, and it's going to be a bloody great summer.
Well, yeah, indeed, and we'll wrap that up. Well, like I said to you last show, when this who should we got a question from the boss. The boss is watching. Who should play, Bharat or Ishan? I think he's talking about the keepers in the ICT final.
Bharat or Ishan? I'd go with Bharat, but I've not got a strong opinion on their keeper position, to be honest.
Just on the keeping position, I
like Bharat.
I don't want to crucify Tucker, but as James, I'm a keeper myself. If Tucker is listening, or any Australian keeper is listening to this, okay, if they're listening to this, when England are advancing down the track, any chance you can keep up to the stumps, any chance whatsoever. Ireland bowlers are bowling 125 Ks, 130. If you're a keeper and you can't set up to stumps with 125K delivery, I know that might sound quick. I don't think you should be keeping, and I think Tucker let himself down there. I think he could apply the pressure on Root, could apply pressure on Stokes and Pope by keeping up, but that's just me. I've done it. I've done it to 125, 130. It is hard. It is very, very hard. But in my opinion, I think if you can't keep to those kind of deliveries, I don't think you should be a keeper. But I'm not here crucifying him, but I'm just saying, I think he missed a trick there, and I like the Australian keeper, whether it's Carey or Pearson, to do the same thing. I know Cummins, Starkaz will bowl 140, but in the appropriate time, I hope he does think ahead and keep up to the stumps. And like I said to you last week, James, before the show cut out, this will be the first time England are facing an aggressive team. They face defensive teams, and I think they're going to be a little bit different when Australia go after them, like they literally do.
New Zealand counter-attacks against England. There have been teams that have tried to take England on.
And I know I mentioned that last week when the first test where we didn't see a New Zealand traditional pitch. Yeah, we saw grass, but it wasn't really that grassy. The second one, they corrected it, and they made it really grassy. So I think it can get in your head. The Bazball can get in your head, and I think it's done that with teams. It won't bother Australia. We've seen that with Pakistan, James, where they played that third test and they tried to advance every ball from the first over, and they got stumps twice in one over. So I can get to teams' head. I don't think it'll get to Australia, but we will have a show for this, James. We'll wrap the show up. As always, James, thank you so much for coming on.
If Bazball comes off, Lucas, I can guarantee you it'll get into Australia's heads. If Bazball comes off in that first test match, it will get into Australia's heads. It will.
if they get into a position, if they can chase down 350, then maybe, but it won't bother us.
If England smash Australia in the first Test match playing Bazball, it will get into Australia's heads. Absolutely guaranteed.
I'll tell you what, I might get in my head because you might never see me again on this show, James. Which yeah, exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, you cough up your medicine when they lose 5-0 as well, James.
England won't lose 5-0.
Yeah, but we'll have a show on that. Thank you, James. I really appreciate the conversation today, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure, Lucas. Hopefully you're booked in for a counselling session or something just to see yourself through the next few weeks.
Again, I guarantee if it's been 21 years since I've seen an Australian win a series in England, and I would like to win one now, please. That would be very nice. I don't want it to be 25.
Well, I apologise, Lucas, in advance because it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so I can't. Ben Stokes took that away from me in the last series in England, where I tweeted what could possibly go wrong, and then Ben Stokes made that 100. So thank you about that. And I had to seek help for the next few months for that. But no, I would like us to win that series, please. I don't care. I don't care if we're up 2-1 and we have to draw and bat the next 100 days in a row. I don't care. As long as we win that series, 5-0, just as good, James.
Well,
but
Lucas, going down your same thought process of basically vain hope, finger in the air, just hoping for success. You want to win the Ashes. Scarlett Johansson, if you're watching, I'll put my phone number at the end of this this broadcast.
No problem. And we'll get to that. But anyway, James, thank you so much for coming. That concludes the show. You're welcome to add James on the Cricket Badger on Twitter or Lucas R32 Sky. And we will see you next time. Thank you, James, for watching, for joining. Peace.